If you want to go from bronze to gold and beyond in Supervive, you'll want to learn the game the way it suits you best. What's poppin' everyone, it's your boy Levi, and today I'm sharing how I climbed from the depths of bronze to gold, all while being a beginner to Supervive. The advice I'm giving is based on my personal experiences, but trust me, you can apply it to any game, or anything in life really, if you want to learn how to be good at something. First and foremost, let's talk about mindset. When I first started playing MOBAs, I quickly realized how crucial it was to have the right attitude. Getting early wins is the key to success, and I don't just mean winning the game. I have a bad habit of starting new things and then dropping them immediately if I don't see some sort of immediate success. I need that dopamine rush right from the beginning, or else the hobby is dead in the water. To combat this, I set easily achievable early wins for myself. Instead of aiming to win games in Supervive, I decided to focus on having a successful day one. In Supervive, there are different ways to play the early game, but some best practices can help you get through it. My goal was to always hit the level 4 cap, gather my items, and have a plan for upgrading my armors and powers. This small achievable goal gave me a sense of satisfaction in every game. Sure, there were some bad level 1 fights, but more often than not, I was making it out of day 1 okay. Far more consistently than I was winning games at least. Next stop is knowing how you learn. Think back to primary school when you took a test to learn your VAC learning style. Are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner? If you're an auditory learner, you'll want to listen to streams and videos, or even have a better player backseat while you play. Maybe join a Discord call or voice chat with teammates to talk through your plays. If you're a kinesthetic learner, you'll need to try out things for yourself. Make that practice tool your best friend and learn all the new tech that way. And if you're like me and you're a visual learner, you'll want to watch and absorb videos of streamers and review your own gameplay to make some improvements. That leads me to picking the best teacher for you. Not every teacher will click with your learning style. For me, I mentioned in the last video that I liked watching the streamer more play the game. Watching his level of play and making my own conclusions based on his actions from game to game worked best for me. Supervive creator Paz also has a great video on how to play the protectors in Supervive, but being instructed on what to do doesn't really work as well for me. If you're an auditory learner, this might be better for you than watching a streamer. Once you know your learning style, it's time to implement it in a way that won't lead to burnout, plateauing, or an unenjoyable experience. This is the concept of good practice versus more practice. You've probably heard the stories of pro esports players practicing their game for 14 to 16 hours a day. While some can handle that, for the average player, that's not going to be helpful. I'm not saying you won't get better if you put in that kind of time, but I believe it's more beneficial to focus on what you're practicing rather than just logging repetitive hours. I like to target one area at a time, focusing on specific details and moving on chronologically once I feel I've got them down. In Supervive, it doesn't make sense to work on endgame strategies like maneuvering as the most wanted if you're still struggling to hit the day 1 level 4 cap. By tightening your focus and honing in on one section, your knowledge and skills will grow and bleed into other areas of the game. Let's talk about how this played out on my climb to gold. During this playtest, I didn't win a ton of games, but I did consistently place between top 3 and top 5. I credit that to being solid through the first 2 days of Supervive, and that's because I'm able to quickly identify my mistakes while watching a player better than me. For example, I was taking the wrong abilities level 1. Fixing that alone turned some of my 9th and 10th place bad games into 6th and 7th minimum. My turbo bad games became outliers, and I started understanding what was going wrong, and it helped me create a game plan. My game plan for the first 2 days looked something like this. If I had drop leader, I'd choose one of 3 locations based on the track. First, I'd check if the stacks were available on the east side of the map. This is my favorite drop location because you can find EXP tomes here that let your team push level 5 on day 1. If the stacks aren't available, I'd try to drop near blue armor vaults for some tier 3 armor. Neither of these locations are hot zones, and both have one thing in common. They compensate for a small bit of user error in your play. Dropping in contested areas increases your risk, but sticking to the safer spots still offers decent rewards without risking too much. After dropping, I'd focus on pushing to level 4 or 5 and grabbing armor. Next, I get in a position to contest a soul on day 2. These are often contested since there are still a lot of teams in the game at this point, so be wary of third parties when you go for fights. I go for souls because they provide 2 green armors for your team. If 2 of your teammates already have blue armors, the other 2 can fit the green armors, creating a strong early game presence. If this plan falls apart, I farm camps, collect items, and spend gold at the shop for green armor. Here's one tip I can give based on my own play. If you get a drop path on the south side of the map, drop in the catacombs or in Cold Fang for a lot of gold. It'll help you get an earlier shop in, and your team can get green armors off the start. If that tip helps, consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments if you want to see a video about drop locations in the future. So that's my game plan for days 1 and 2. I've emphasized having a consistent game plan with only slight deviations for a good reason. Consistency is the key to learning. The more the game changes, the harder it is to retain information because you're constantly facing new scenarios. The biggest culprit for inconsistency is trying to learn multiple characters at once. I'm all for experimenting with different characters at the start, but once you find the 1 or 2 that click with you, stick with them. Playing the same characters makes the game consistent. You'll learn the macro aspects of the game and how the map layout works. You also build muscle memory for that character, making it easier to focus on strategy rather than mechanics. Now that you got your character and game plan, it's time to implement the 80-20 rule. 80% of your play should be about learning and understanding Supervive, and 20% should be about implementing what you've learned. Take the playtest for example. It was 3 days long. For the first 2 days, I limit tested, learning what fights I could take, which ones I couldn't, and how good I was at taking vaults. Because of this, I bounced around between Silver 3 and Silver 4, and I didn't see much climb, but that wasn't the goal. I was basically only trying to find out the ideal plays for different situations. This can be extremely frustrating if it's the first time you've tried practicing this way. Knowing that you potentially throw games for the sake of learning is tough, but I promise you it will pay off in the long run. If you play safe, only relying on the plays that you know you can do, you'll eventually plateau. There's a reason why it's called limit testing. On the final day of the playtest, I took everything I'd learned and implemented it. I climbed the whole division from Silver 4 to Gold. Despite this being my highest climb, these weren't always my best game. I typically like to take a break between the 80% learning and the 20% implementing phases to prevent burnout, but with the playtest being a limited amount of time, I couldn't do that. That brings me to the importance of taking breaks. Whether you're tilted, have IRL stuff going on, or just need a break, take one. Pushing yourself when you're not in the right mindset will only build bad habits. Above all else, games are meant to be fun, and if you're not having fun, it'll be much harder to retain information. One way I like to take a break is if I'm feeling mechanical fatigue and still in the mindset for learning is by watching and reviewing games. I'll record all my games and review the ones where I'm unsure of what to do during the game. I keep a document of the game's timestamps and questions that I have while watching the replay. I try to answer these questions myself first, but if I'm genuinely lost, I'll try to do the research through content creators. The first thing I wanted to address is the fear of failure. Supervive isn't an easy game, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Don't let these mistakes discourage you. Mistakes are where you'll find your biggest opportunities to learn. MOBAs and Battle Royales are all about how much experience you have with them. You need to figure out what doesn't work to understand what does. Embrace your mistakes, analyze them, and use them as stepping stones to get better. Every failure is a lesson in disguise. Another important tip is to try and push yourself while playing up, playing against opponents who are better than you. If you're a gold player wanting to keep improving, try to get into these higher level lobbies or in-house. Playing against stronger players forces you to adapt, learning new strategies, and refine your skills. On the flip side, if you're constantly stomping on players who are below your level, you won't learn anything new. Worse, you might even develop bad habits. That's why I strongly advise against smurfing when learning the game. It's easy to fall into the trap that playing for pub stomping instead of playing to improve, and that can seriously hurt your growth as a player. Finally, if you're having an off day, don't force yourself to keep playing. Instead, focus on reviewing your past games. Watch your replays, identify the mistakes you made, and look for areas where you can improve. This kind of reflection can be just as valuable as playing the game itself. And if reviewing isn't helping either, take a break. Go outside, touch some grass, take a walk, clear your mind. It's important to avoid burnout, and sometimes the best way to do that is to step away from the game for a bit. So that's how I climb from bronze to gold in Supervive. Mindset, good practice, learning from your failures, and then keep pushing and staying focused. You'll get there. If you found this video helpful, I'm thinking about putting out a guide series for this game once I get the hang of more of it. If that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comments. If you're ready to take your game to the next level but don't know what character to do it on, click or tap the screen now and you'll be taken to my previous video from the last playtest on what characters to try out.